When I'm writing jazz music and it's going really well, it feels like I'm just hearing it in my head and all I have to do is translate it on the page. But what my students struggle with when they first start writing their own jazz music is like, oh, they can hear a melody and figure out what they're hearing in their head. But it's really hard to hear a chord and figure out what you're feeling in your head, you know? Sometimes you might have a chord that's like 3 notes at a time, or 4 notes at a time, or 5 notes at a time, or 7 notes at a time, right? And it can be hard to hear all of that all at once. And so what we need when we're writing music is a way to test our chords, which means we need to have a system to find chords really fast on the piano. Luckily, it is really straightforward to build jazz chords on the piano. Basically, the way we do it, it kind of follows a formula actually. So in every jazz chord, there's just a couple categories that we need to fulfill in order to make it sound like a jazz chord, okay? So the first is the root category, right? So I'm gonna use C major 7 as an example, right? So the root category would be C, okay? And then the second is the third category, which would be E. And then the fifth category, G. And the seventh category, B, right? So if we have all of those, it's gonna sound like the chord. We could do the same thing for F minor 7. Root category, third category, fifth category, seventh category, right? Now in jazz music, a lot of the times like the bass player is gonna be playing the bass notes, so we actually don't need to play the root category, which means we can switch it out for the ninth category, right? Which sounds a little bit more colorful. Now we're not hearing the sound of that root note, but if the bass player was gonna play it, like if I was gonna play it in my left hand, then it sounds like a jazz chord, right? And you can do this for any chords. Here's F minor 7, or we could do A major 7, or we could do G7, right? It makes it sound like that chord, okay? Now, let's take that and let's apply it to a chord progression, okay? So most common chord progression in jazz music, 2-5-1, all right? So we're gonna do a 2-5-1 in C major, that's D, G, C, right? D minor, G7, C major 7, okay. Cool, so let's start with the D minor. We're gonna do root category, third category, fifth category, seventh category. That's D, F, A, C. And then I'm gonna switch out the root for the ninth. Right, that's E instead of D. Add the bass note. Boom, sounds like D minor 7, okay? And then now let's do that G7. So we have the root category, G, but I'm gonna switch it out for the ninth. Boom, which is A. And then I'll go the third, B, fifth, D, seventh, F, right? Add the bass note. Great. And then the next step is the C major 7, okay? So root category, I'm gonna switch it out for the ninth, and then third, fifth, major 7th, add the bass note, okay? So now I can take that whole chord progression and play it back to back. Okay, so that sounds like a 2-5-1 in the key of C major. Great, we did it. But I don't know if you noticed it, it's kind of awkward the way I played it. I jumped around a lot. Right? And I don't know about you, but my first instrument is the drums. I learned piano later, and so it's a little awkward for me to have to jump around like that. And it also sounds weird when I'm composing. I don't want to think so much about like what I have to do with my hands. It just sounds awkward to me for all that jumping to happen, right? Boo, ba, boo. I want to hear it a little bit smoother. So we need to figure out a way that we can get that chord progression, get all the categories without jumping around so much. So here's the thing to remember from the beginning. I said we need one note from each of the category, root category, third category, fifth category, seventh category. I didn't say they have to be in a particular order, right? So here I went 1, 3, 5, 7, but I can also go 3, 5, 7, 1, right? It still sounds like C major 7, and I'll do the ninth actually. So 9, 3, 5, 7, right? 3, 5, 7, 9. Still sounds like C major 7, right? 5, 7, 9, 3. Still sounds like C major 7. And then 7, 9, 3, 5. Right? Still sounds like C major 7. This is what we call an inversion, okay? So it's the same notes, just in a different order. Okay, so how does that help us with the voice leading, the jumpiness, right? I'll show you. So check it out. I'm gonna start with the 2 chord in the 2-5-1, the D minor 7, right? I've got it voiced like 9, 3, 5, 7. Okay, great. Now, next I'm going to go to the G7 and I'm going to find the closest notes that fulfill all the categories. Okay, so I'm going to leave my hand here and then I'm going to change the bass note. Okay, cool. So I'm on G. Let's see if I have all the categories. So I have the root category, which would be G, but I'm going to switch it out for the ninth. Oh, my finger's already there. Okay, great. And then I need the third category, which would be B. This is on C. I can just move it down one note, right? And then I need the fifth category. This is on E. I need D for the fifth category. Boom. I can just move down one note, right? And then I need the seventh category, which is F in this case. My finger's already there, okay? So I don't know if you saw that. Now I'm in 5, 7, 9, 3, right? But it made it so I only had to move 2 fingers. So let's go back a step. This is D minor 7. That's G7, right? So I only had to move this to that and this to that, right? This is a really basic voicings, but okay, great. Let's keep going. Let's go to C major 7. Okay, so for C major 7, I'm going to change the bass note. I need a root category, which I'm going to make into a ninth, which is D. I already have that. Okay, great. And then I need a third category, which is E. If I move this F down to E, boom, perfect. Then I need a fifth category, which is G. This finger's on A, boom, I can move right down to G, right? And then I need a seventh category, which is B, and my finger's already there, right? So now I'm back to 9, 3, 5, 7, right? So again, going from the G to the C, I'm going like this. Right? Very simple, this is what we call smooth voice leading. Right? Instead of bouncing around like this, I can just move a couple fingers at a time. So the whole chord progression. Boom. You see how little I had to move my hands to do all that? It's much slicker and it makes the muscle memory a lot easier so that when I'm composing, I don't need to think so much about my piano technique, but I can actually think about the chords and what I'm hearing, and that way I can actually write music quicker. Because that's the point. I'm not a pianist, I'm a composer, right? I'm using the piano as a tool for composing, okay? Now, so we have all the inversions, right? 9, 3, 7, 5, 3, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 3, and then 7, 9, 3, 5, right? And you could play every chord in every inversion. And you're probably thinking like, that sounds like a lot of work to me. And it sounds like a lot of work to me too. So you can do that and you probably should. But really there's some inversions that are way more useful than others. And you can narrow down your practice time so that you can actually focus on composing by just focusing on the ones that really work the best, okay? So I'll just tell you right now, there's some rules for voicings that make some voicings work better than others, okay? So I'm gonna use F minor 7 as an example. So I'm gonna start in this inversion, okay? So we have F minor 7, and I'm gonna go 9th, 3rd, 5th, 7th, right? Okay? So in general, we don't wanna have a half step at the top of a voicing, right? Because it creates a lot of distance that's actually kind of distracting from the melody, okay? So check this out. If I take this chord and then I move it up the inversions, right? I just took the same notes and I just moved up the inversions. Now I have the ninth and the minor third right next to each other at the top, which creates this minor second at the top of the voicing. Now, you don't necessarily notice it in the context of this, but the voicings that don't have a minor second, they just sound a little bit more consonant. They don't sound as, you don't hear that clash as much. So it actually works better to avoid a second in the top of the melody, okay? So that's the voicing that goes 5, 7, 9, 3. You're always gonna have a second in the top because the ninth and the third are right next to each other, okay? The other thing to avoid is having the second at the bottom. Now, this isn't as hard and fast of a rule, But generally, like if there's a second at the bottom, especially as you get lower, it gets really, really muddy. So just for flexibility's sake, again, we're trying to narrow this down to a couple voicings that work for most situations. It's best to avoid, putting, I would never really voice that low, but there's going to be like C minor 7, for example, right? That sounds muddy, where that sounds more open, right? So in general, the rule is try to avoid a minor second at the top and a minor second at the bottom, or really just a second, okay? So what does that give us? That gives us two voicings, 3, 5, 7, 9, okay? And then the other one it gives us is having the minor second in the middle, which is 7, 9, 3, 5, okay? So that's, or, right, I'll put the bass notes in. Okay? Cool. So that gives us something. That gives us a place to start. And just a quick disclaimer, you can use any voicing. At some point, you will probably use all of those voicings, but I'm just going to say, for the sake of like on the fly composing, having the muscle memory to not really think about it so that you can just hear what you're writing, let's stick to these for now, okay? Now, like I said, that leaves two clean voicings, and let's apply this back to our 2-5-1, okay? So I'm back in D minor. The two clean voicings are 3, 5, 7, 9, and 7, 9, 3, 5, okay? Those are the two ones. Now, what's really cool is with the 2-5-1s, if we follow those voicings, it'll stay within those rules. So I'll show you what I mean. Watch this. I have the 2 chord, D minor 7, okay? There's no second at the bottom or the top. And then now I'm going to go to the 5 chord, G7. You see the second is in the middle, which is good. That's what we want. And then I'm going to go to C major 7. Right? You see there's no second in there at all. Okay, great. So that's starting from 3, 5, 7, 9. Now let's start from 7, 9, 3, 5, okay? So again, second is in the middle, and then I'm going to go to G7, no second, and then I'm going to go to C major 7. Second is in the middle, right? So it really works perfectly to where you avoid some of those more ugly voicings, right? The one with the second at the top is really the one that kind of bugs me. So you have that second there, and then not as bad, but still I'd rather avoid it. And then you have that second at the top again, right? So if you stick to those two voicings, 3, 5, 7, 9 and 7, 9, 3, 5, then it's going to make it so you avoid that. And those are really the two voicings that I would focus on. Now, this means instead of having to learn every chord and every inversion, you just have to focus on 2 inversions for every single chord, and they flow into each other naturally. And the cool thing about these chords is that they follow a pattern, right? They have the categories. So whether the chord is, say D7 sharp 11, right? Right? Or it's D7 sharp 9 sharp 5, right? It still follows the same categories. It's just you have to know what notes fit into which category, and the muscle memory will be very similar. So what's really important here is you do have to know which notes fit into which categories so that you can switch them out. Like if you see D7 sharp 9 sharp 5, you have to know what's in the root category. What is the sharp 9? What category does that go in, right? So I'll tell you right now. So let's use C as an example, and it's going to be C major, C minor, depending on what notes we have, but let's just use C as an example. So in the root category, the potential options are the root, which would be C, the flat 9, which would be D flat, right? The natural 9, which would be D natural, or the sharp 9, which would be D sharp, okay? So, say we have C7, the root category can be C, C flat 9, C9, or C sharp 9, right? That's the root category, any of these notes, okay? Now, the third category, it's pretty much going to be whatever the third is. There's not really a lot of options here. So if it's C major 7, it's a major third. E, right? If it's C minor 7, it's the minor third. If it's C sus, this is one of the exceptions. If it's C sus, the fourth kind of acts as the third, right? Right? So then the third category would actually be the fourth, okay? So those are the two options. It's the fourth, the major third, or the minor third for the third category, okay? For the fifth category, it can be the natural fifth, it can be the sharp fifth, it can be the 13th, right? Or it can be the flat 5, which we also sometimes call the sharp 11. It's the same thing. So if we had C7 again, I can have C7 with a natural fifth, right? Or sharp 11, or sharp 5, right? Or a 13, right? Those are all options. And you'll see that when you're reading through the real book or something, you'll see, C7, sharp 5, and you got to know how to voice that. Another thing that you'll see is you'll actually see the natural 11th, so in this case, F, as in that fifth category. And usually you'll only see it in chords that kind of support that. So something that's really common is C minor 11. Instead of having C, E flat, G, B flat, you'll have the F switching out for the G, the 11th switching out for the fifth. So that's the fifth category. The seventh category is kind of like the third. It's just whatever the seventh of the chord is. It has to be that, okay? So if you have C major 7, it has to be that major 7th, right? If you have C minor 7, it has to be that flat 7, right? If you have C major 6, C major 6, 9, that sixth is going to act like the 7th. So it actually fits in the 7th category. So C major 6, 9, right? Instead of the major 7th, right? So the cool thing for all of those like subbed out notes in the different categories is it's all going to be like within a step of the first voicing you ever learned, right? So C major 7, C7, sharp 9, sharp 5, right? Or C minor 7, right? They're all just like a half step or a whole step apart. So if you learn the muscle memory for one of them, you're going to find that the next ones, they come really fast. So if you're trying to get to this point where you can sit and compose jazz music and you can actually know what you're playing and what it sounds like, and you can test things, and you can say, oh, do I want that to be a 5 or a sharp 5, right? And really sound those things out. Then what I recommend you do to get all that muscle memory going is to just take those two voicing structures that work really well, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 7, 9, 3, 5, and take those through 2, 5, 1s, right? And figure out the voice leading, just like we talked about, the closest possible notes that fit the categories, and just do that for all 12 keys, right? Pick one set of extensions, minor 7, natural 9, okay? And then sharp 9, sharp 5, for example, and then major 7, right? And just pick that set of extensions and just take it through all 12 keys. And once you do that, 2, 5, 1s, like most jazz music follows that kind of pattern. And if it doesn't, you will have played pretty much every major and minor chord. And so you'll have the muscle memory as a basis so that when you're composing music, you don't have to do all this piano thinking or whatever. You can just focus on, oh, I have the muscle memory to play almost any chord. Now I can focus on playing the music that I want to play and writing the music that I want to play. So I hope that helps you. If you found this interesting, there's some links where you can work closer with me below, and you can do all the liking and subscribing that you want to do. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.